Let me read from paragraph 9. The nearest zoo was at Lucknow, 200 miles away, reserving a first-class compartment for himself and Timothy. No one would share a compartment with them. Grandfather took him to Lucknow, where the zoo authorities were only too glad to receive as a gift a well-fed and fairly civilized tiger. Let me explain to you all. Grandfather decided to shift Timothy to the nearest zoo in Lucknow, which was about 200 miles away from Dehradun. Grandfather made a special arrangement to take Timothy through first class compartment. He booked whole first class compartment for himself and Timothy so that no one should share a compartment. When they reached the zoo in Lucknow, authorities of zoo were very happy to receive trained tiger as a gift. Not only trained, even well fed, that is a healthy tiger. Let us read from paragraph 10. About 6 months later, when my grandparents were visiting relatives in Lucknow, grandfather took the opportunity of calling at the zoo to see how Timothy was getting on. I was not there to accompany him, but I heard all about it when he returned to Dehra. Let me explain to you. Later, after 6 months, when grandfather was happened to visit relatives at Lucknow, he thought of meeting Timothy as he did not want to miss an opportunity of meeting him. He even wanted to know how Timothy was doing there. During this time, Arthur was not with grandfather, but he was given every information about Timothy after he returned to Dehra. Let us go to the paragraph 11. Arriving at the zoo, grandfather made straight for the particular cage in which Timothy had been interned. The tiger was there, crouched in a corner, full grown, and with a magnificent stripped coat. Let me explain to you. Grandfather knew where the Timothy was kept, so he went straight to that particular cage. He saw that Timothy had been interned. Interned mean put under restriction. He was sitting in a corner with a crouched position. Timothy was fully grown with the magnificent stripped coat on his body. Means extremely beautiful, attractive stripped coat. Let us read paragraph 12. The tiger approached the bars and allowed grandfather to put both hands around his head. Grandfather stroked the tiger's forehead and tickled his ear, and whenever he growled, smacked him across the mouth, which was his old way of keeping him quiet. Let me explain to you. As soon as Tiger saw grandfather, he approached the bars and allowed grandfather to put his both hands around his head. Grandfather stroked, moved his hands gently on Tiger's forehead and tickled his ears. And when the tiger was growling, means making sounds in throat, grandfather smacked. Smacked means struck with his palm across his mouth, which was the old way of keeping Timothy quiet. Let us read from paragraph 13. He licked grandfather's hands and only sprang away when a leopard in the next cage snarled at him. Grandfather shooed the leopard away and the tiger returned to lick his hands. But every now and then the leopard would rush at the bars and the tiger would slink back to his corner. Let me explain to you. Grandfather noticed that whenever the tiger was coming near to lick his hands, the leopard in the next cage would snarl. Snarl means showing the teeth and making noise in anger. It was doing it repeatedly at the tiger. Grandfather got angry on leopard and shooed his hands towards the leopard. Shooed meaning waved his hands to go back to leopard. Due to leopard's behavior, the tiger would slink back to his corner. Meaning of slink is more quietly. Let us read from paragraph 14. A number of people had gathered to watch the reunion when a keeper pushed his way through the crowd and asked grandfather what he was doing. "I'm talking to Timothy," said grandfather. "Weren't you here when I gave him to the zoo 6 months ago?" "I haven't been here very long," said the surprised keeper. "Please continue your conversation, but I have never been able to touch him myself. He is always very bad-tempered. Why don't you put him somewhere else?" suggested grandfather. "That leopard keeps frightening him. I'll go and see the superintendent about it." Let me explain to you. People in the zoo rushed towards the Timothy's cage as it seemed interesting to watch the conversation between grandfather and the Timothy. When the keeper saw the crowd gathered near the tiger's cage, he pushed back the people and reached to see what was happening. He asked grandfather what he was doing there because keeper did not recognize grandfather as he was new to that zoo. By listening to the conversation of grandfather and the tiger, keeper was surprised and told to him, "This tiger is very dangerous. I myself was never be able to touch him." Then grandfather told to keeper, "This tiger is mine, whom I left 6 months ago. Now, when I am having conversation with my tiger Timothy, this leopard in the next cage is troubling him a lot. So I am worried. Hence, I decided to go and tell the superintendent to shift the place of Timothy." Let us read from paragraph 15. Grandfather went in search of the superintendent of the zoo, but found that he had gone home early. And so, after wandering about the zoo for a little while, he returned to Timothy's cage to say goodbye. It was beginning to get dark. Let me explain to you. Grandfather could not find superintendent as he went his home early that day. So, after wandering in the zoo for a while, grandfather thought of returning back to Timothy's cage to say goodbye to him as it was getting dark. Let me read from paragraph 16. He had been stroking and slapping Timothy for about 5 minutes when he found another keeper observing him with some alarm. Grandfather recognized him as the keeper who had been there when Timothy had first come to the zoo. "You remember me," said Grandfather. "Now why don't you transfer Timothy to another cage, away from the stupid leopard?" "But, sir," stammered the keeper, "it is not your tiger." I know," said Grandfather testily. "I realized he is no longer mine, but you might at least take a suggestion or two from me." "I remember your tiger very well," said the keeper. "He died 2 months ago." "Died?" exclaimed Grandfather. "Yes, sir, of pneumonia. This tiger was trapped in the hills only last month, and he is very dangerous. Let me explain to you. Timothy, the tiger, came near the bars of the cage when he saw Grandfather and allowed him to stroke, meaning moved hands with gentle pressure over hair, and also slapped for about 5 minutes. During this time, Grandfather happened to recognize the keeper standing in some distance away. He was the same keeper whom he attended when Timothy was brought to a zoo 6 months ago. Grandfather called him and told, "You know my tiger Timothy better, so it is better to shift him away from this foolish leopard." When the keeper heard Grandfather, he started stammering to tell it was not your tiger Timothy. Grandfather told, "I understood what you mean to say. It's no more mine. Now it belongs to the zoo. But at least you can take my suggestion and shift the Timothy's place." The keeper replied, "Sir, I know your tiger very well. It died 2 months ago due to pneumonia. This tiger whom you are thinking, your Timothy, was trapped in the hills previous month and he is very dangerous." Let us read the last paragraph, number 17. Grandfather could think of nothing to say. The tiger was still licking his arm with increasing relish. Grandfather took what seemed to him an age to withdraw his hand from the cage. With his face near the tiger's, he mumbled, "Good night, Timothy," and giving the keeper a scornful look, walked briskly out of the zoo. Let me explain to you. Grandfather had no words to say when he heard that tiger was not his Timothy. He slowly withdrew his hand from the cage as it was licking with relish. Do you know, children, why the tiger was licking Grandfather's hand with relish? Because nobody went near him and it was thinking of delicious food. Before Grandfather leaving, he kept his face near the tiger and mumbled, means spoke quietly, "Good night, Timothy." Finally, while returning, He gave a scornful look, that is, disrespect look, to the keeper who did not bother to warn him.
Dear students, from this lesson, we learn that animals respond to love and other human emotions, and keeping them as pets help us love and understand them better.
This is the end of lesson number 1, A Tiger in the House. Students, I want you all to read this lesson at least for 2 to 3 times. Thank you.